What if everything we know about the beginning of civilization is wrong? What if the first kings ruled not for decades but for thousands, tens of thousands of years? Somewhere between history and myth, there lies a single tablet that whispers of an impossible past. It is called the Sumerian King List, and it does not behave the way a normal record should. Before we go any further, take a moment to settle in. Let the quiet find you. And before you grow too comfortable, please consider where you're listening from and what time it is there beneath your sky. For what you're about to hear challenges everything you thought you knew about the arc of human achievement. The story begins not in some ivory tower, but in the soft cradle of the Fertile Crescent, modern-day Iraq. Dr. Elias Thornfield, a retired aerospace systems engineer who once calculated orbital trajectories for classified satellite programs, first encountered the anomaly while consulting on ground-penetrating radar surveys in 2003. Among the dust of ancient cities, archaeologists working under military protection had found a small dark tablet written in cuneiform, the earliest known form of systematic record-keeping. The language belonged to the Sumerians, a civilization that appeared suddenly around 4000 BCE, with cities, legal frameworks, irrigation networks, temples, and a sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics that would make a NASA engineer pause in recognition. It was as if advanced organizational systems had sprung fully formed from the Mesopotamian soil, bypassing the usual millennia of gradual technological development. Yet among the many tablets unearthed at Nippur, Larsa, and Uruk, one seemed to belong to a different operational timeline entirely. On it were listed the names of 8 administrative leaders: Alulim, Alalgar, Enmenlu Anna, Enmengal Anna, Dumuzid the Shepherd, Ensipazi Anna, Enmendur Anna, and Ubar Tutu, each managing a single urban center before a world-changing catastrophic event that Graham Hancock has termed the Great Reset. Yet beside each name stood a management tenure so vast that it defied conventional organizational theory. Not the 28,000 and 43,000 years that later copyists would inflate, but still staggering. 2,800 years for Alulim, 3,600 for Alalgar, progressively increasing to 4,220 years for Enmenlu Anna, then a dramatic jump to 28,800 years for the later rulers, culminating in Ubar Tutu's extraordinary 89,400-year administration. Together, their combined oversight spanned exactly 241,200 years, a number that Christopher Dunn's engineering analysis reveals follows precise mathematical progressions based on the Sumerian base 60 system, multiplied by their sacred number 432. At first, establishment historians dismissed it as mythological inflation, symbolic representation of divine authority designed to legitimize later dynasties. But then came Professor Helena Grimshaw's disturbing discovery during her geological survey work in 2018. After the catastrophic event that Randall Carlson's research identifies as the Younger Dryas impact, the administrative record continued with names of managers who were historically verified through independent archaeological documentation. The list transitioned seamlessly from the impossible into the verifiable. There was no clear operational boundary between the mythic timeline and recorded management succession. It was as though someone had documented institutional continuity backward, beginning with advanced systems operating on cosmic timescales, ending in primitive reorganization measured in human decades. Commander Pike Blackwood, who had spent 32 years managing classified archaeological operations across the Middle East, understood what mainstream academics refused to acknowledge. His field teams had documented the same pattern at 17 different excavation sites. Precision-engineered infrastructure buried beneath exactly 2.3 meters of sediment, deposited during a single catastrophic event around 2900 BCE. The sediment analysis revealed something that made his daughter, Dr. Iris Blackwood, question everything she'd learned in her archaeological training. The deposition wasn't gradual. It showed characteristics of rapid, systematic burial, as if someone had deliberately archived advanced installations before a predicted catastrophic event. What did these numbers actually represent? Adrian Cross, an independent systems analyst who specialized in ancient information networks and had worked extensively with the research of Graham Hancock and Robert Schoch, began to recognize computational patterns that academic institutions had either overlooked or deliberately suppressed. His analysis revealed that the reign lengths weren't arbitrary. When converted through the Sumerian sexagesimal system, they corresponded to specific astronomical cycles. 2,800 years approximated 1/9 of the 25,920-year precession cycle, while 28,800 years represented a complete precessional shift with mathematical precision that modern GPS satellites use for long-term orbital calculations. The Sumerians were meticulous systems administrators, as Christopher Dunn's engineering surveys have demonstrated. They measured operational parameters using a mathematical framework based on 60 rather than 10, allowing extraordinary computational precision in astronomical observations. Their mathematical architecture influenced every technological civilization that followed, from Babylonian astronomy to our current time management protocols. So when they recorded that Alulim maintained administrative oversight for 2,800 years, it wasn't arbitrary data entry. The number integrated seamlessly into their systematic computational architecture, exactly 432,000 days, a figure that appears in advanced astronomical calculations across multiple ancient civilizations. To them, numbers were not statistical abstractions. They were the operational parameters of reality itself, embedded in what they called the ME, divine decrees that governed everything from irrigation management to stellar observation. Dr. Thornfield, analyzing the precision of their astronomical calculations with the same software used for satellite trajectory planning, realized he was examining engineering specifications that shouldn't have existed in humanity's supposed infancy. Their observational data tracked planetary cycles with accuracy that modern aerospace navigation didn't achieve until the computer age. Their observational accuracy extended to Venus's 584-day synodic cycle, calculated to within minutes of modern measurements. They tracked Jupiter's 11.86-year orbital period and Saturn's 29.46-year cycle with precision that required continuous observation across multiple generations. This wasn't primitive stargazing. It was systematic astronomical engineering that implied institutional knowledge continuity spanning the very timescales their King List documented. But the most unsettling discovery came when Dr. Iris Blackwood began correlating her father's classified excavation reports with publicly available geological data. The flood layers weren't isolated phenomena. They appeared at precisely the same stratigraphic level across 17 different archaeological sites spanning 400 kilometers of ancient Mesopotamia. Each site showed identical deposition characteristics: 2.3 meters of fine alluvial clay containing no cultural artifacts, separating sophisticated pre-flood installations from primitive post-flood settlements. Radiocarbon dating consistently placed this depositional event at 2900 BCE, exactly matching the conclusion of the antediluvian section of the King List. Professor Grimshaw's geological analysis revealed something that made establishment archaeologists deeply uncomfortable. The sediment composition showed characteristics of systematic, controlled deposition rather than chaotic flood damage. Particle size distribution, chemical composition, even the absence of organic debris suggested coordinated burial rather than catastrophic destruction. "It's as if someone systematically archived these installations," she noted in her classified report to Commander Blackwood's team. The precision engineering beneath these layers shows no signs of damage or hasty abandonment. Everything was carefully sealed and preserved. Adrian Cross had been tracking similar patterns in Randall Carlson's geological research on the Younger Dryas boundary layer. Around 12,800 years ago, Earth experienced systematic environmental disruption that Carlson's impact research suggests involved cosmic collision events, massive atmospheric loading from impact-generated debris, ice sheet destabilization, oceanic circulation disruption. When the environmental systems eventually restabilized around 11,600 years ago, global sea levels had risen more than 120 meters. Entire continental shelf regions vanished beneath oceanic expansion. The Persian Gulf Basin, the Black Sea Shelf, the Mediterranean coastal plains, vast areas that Graham Hancock's underwater archaeological research suggests once supported extensive human settlements. Some researchers call the submerged region between modern Iraq and Iran the Eden Delta, a hypothetical cradle of pre-Sumerian civilization eliminated by post-glacial oceanic expansion. Satellite bathymetry reveals structured anomalies on the Persian Gulf seafloor, rectilinear formations too regular for natural geology, suggesting systematic infrastructure now 60 meters underwater. Could this have been the advanced civilization remembered in Sumerian institutional documentation? Cross's analytical framework grows more compelling with each new discovery. The King List wasn't recording individual human lifespans. It was documenting institutional knowledge continuity across environmental transition periods that eliminated surface evidence of previous technological capability. Dr. Thornfield's aerospace background allowed him to recognize something that traditional archaeologists missed entirely. The precision specifications embedded in Sumerian technological documentation weren't primitive approximations. They were engineering standards that modern satellite navigation systems still employ. Their astronomical observations required technological infrastructure capable of tracking stellar positions to fractional degree accuracy across multi-generational observation periods. Their mathematical frameworks incorporated concepts that European civilization didn't redevelop until the scientific revolution. Their hydraulic engineering managed water distribution across regional scales using gravitational flow calculations that required sophisticated surveying capabilities. Such technological integration doesn't emerge overnight. It requires institutional knowledge accumulation across the very timescales that their administrative succession records documented. When the King List described Alulim's 2,800-year oversight period, it might have been recording actual institutional continuity under systematic management protocols designed to maintain technological capability across extended operational timeframes. Commander Blackwood had seen enough classified excavation data to understand what mainstream academia refused to acknowledge. The technological capabilities that appeared suddenly in Sumerian civilization weren't innovations. They were restoration of archived knowledge systems that had been systematically preserved through catastrophic transition periods. His teams had documented precision stone-cutting techniques that Christopher Dunn's engineering analysis showed required diamond-tipped rotary tools operating at industrial RPM specifications. They had found metallurgical samples displaying molecular-level alloying precision that modern laboratories struggle to reproduce. They had mapped underground hydraulic systems incorporating pressure, differentials, and flow dynamics that required advanced computational modeling, yet officially, these discoveries remained classified, filed away in government archives that the public would never access. The implications threatened too many established institutional frameworks. If human technological capability extended much further into the past than official histories acknowledged, then current academic, religious, and political authority structures would require systematic reconfiguration. Dr. Iris Blackwood found herself caught between her professional training and the evidence her own excavations had revealed. The official archaeological narrative described gradual technological development from primitive agriculture to urban civilization over several millennia. But the physical evidence showed sophisticated engineering capabilities appearing fully developed without any transitional phases. It was as if technological civilization had been systematically restored rather than gradually invented. The precision of early Sumerian astronomical observations, the mathematical sophistication of their computational frameworks, the engineering complexity of their infrastructure systems, all suggested institutional knowledge inheritance rather than independent innovation. When she compared the technological specifications documented in early Sumerian records with the engineering capabilities that Christopher Dunn had identified in ancient Egyptian construction, the parallels were undeniable. Both civilizations displayed technological knowledge that appeared without developmental precedent, implemented with precision that required institutional continuity across extended timeframes, then systematically declined as if that knowledge was being gradually lost rather than continuously developed. The pattern suggested cyclical technological development rather than linear progress, advanced capabilities emerging, reaching optimization, then undergoing managed decline before eventual restoration in modified form. You who have navigated corporate restructuring and technological obsolescence might recognize this operational pattern. Every industry transition eliminates established expertise. Every platform migration renders previous knowledge temporarily inaccessible. Every generational transfer requires systematic retraining in capabilities that previous management teams had mastered. The difference is operational scale. The Sumerians were describing this process across geological timelines. The deeper Adrian Cross analyzed the mathematical relationships embedded in the King List, the more systematic the pattern became. The reign progressions weren't random mythological inflation. They followed precise computational sequences based on astronomical cycles that required multi-generational observation to calculate. Alulim's 2,800-year period represented exactly 1/9 of the 25,200-year precession cycle that ancient astronomers used to track the slow wobble of Earth's rotational axis. Enmenlu-Anna's 4,220-year reign corresponded to 1/6 of the same cycle. The later exponential increases, 28,800 and 89,400 years, represented combinations of multiple precessional periods calculated with mathematical precision that modern orbital mechanics still employ. But who could have maintained institutional continuity across such extended timeframes? Cross's research into Graham Hancock's work on advanced prehistoric civilizations suggested a possibility that mainstream archaeology refused to consider: systematic knowledge preservation networks operating according to protocols designed to survive catastrophic transition periods. Dr. Thornfield had encountered similar systematic approaches during his classified aerospace projects. Long-term satellite missions required redundant knowledge preservation systems designed to maintain operational capability across extended time frames when direct human oversight became impractical. Critical technical specifications were encoded into multiple storage formats, distributed across separate institutional networks, with built-in restoration protocols that could reconstruct operational capability from archived components. The Sumerian King List might represent exactly such a knowledge preservation system. Institutional specifications encoded in narrative format, designed to preserve critical information about advanced technological capabilities through periods when direct technological implementation became temporarily impossible. Professor Grimshaw's geological research had documented similar systematic preservation approaches in other ancient sites. At Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, Klaus Schmidt's excavations revealed precision-engineered megalithic installations that had been systematically buried around 8000 BCE, carefully sealed under precisely deposited fill material that preserved the structures in perfect condition for 10,000 years. The burial wasn't destruction, it was archival. Someone had deliberately preserved advanced technological installations for future recovery when operational conditions improved. Randall Carlson's geological analysis of the site confirmed that the burial occurred during a period of environmental instability, suggesting systematic preservation protocols activated during predicted catastrophic periods. Commander Blackwood's classified reports documented identical preservation patterns at 17 different Mesopotamian sites. Advanced installations systematically archived beneath precisely controlled sediment deposition, with restoration markers that indicated planned future recovery rather than permanent abandonment. His daughter Iris had begun to understand the institutional implications. If the antediluvian kings represented systematic knowledge preservation networks rather than individual rulers, then their extraordinary tenure periods made operational sense. Advanced technological capabilities required institutional continuity across extended development timeframes, generations of coordinated observation, calculation, and refinement that no individual lifespan could accommodate. The flood described in Sumerian records wasn't just environmental catastrophe, it was systematic transition between different phases of technological development. When the administrative records stated that kingship was taken up to heaven, they were describing controlled archival of advanced capabilities during predicted instability periods. When they recorded that kingship descended from heaven after the catastrophic transition, they were documenting systematic restoration of preserved knowledge networks. Dr. Thornfield's aerospace background allowed him to recognize the technological sophistication embedded in this archival approach. Modern space missions use similar protocols. Critical mission data gets systematically preserved in multiple formats designed to survive extended periods of system unavailability, with restoration procedures that can reconstruct operational capability from archived specifications. The Sumerians had developed institutional preservation systems that operated across geological rather than technological timescales. Their mathematical frameworks, astronomical observations, engineering specifications, administrative protocols, all encoded into preservation formats designed to survive environmental transition periods that would eliminate surface evidence of advanced technological capability. Christopher Dunn's precision engineering analysis of Sumerian technological artifacts revealed implementation capabilities that required institutional knowledge continuity across the very time frames that their administrative succession records documented. Their metallurgical techniques displayed molecular-level control that modern industrial processes struggle to achieve. Their astronomical calculations incorporated observational data that required continuous institutional observation across multiple centuries. Such technological integration couldn't emerge overnight through individual innovation. It required systematic institutional development across extended operational timeframes, exactly what their King List documentation preserved in narrative format. When Cross analyzed the technological specifications embedded in early Sumerian records using computational modeling software, the results were disturbing. Their engineering capabilities didn't represent primitive trial-and-error experimentation. They displayed systematic implementation of advanced technological principles that suggested institutional inheritance rather than independent innovation. Their irrigation systems incorporated hydraulic engineering that required computational modeling of regional water distribution networks. Their astronomical installations displayed precision alignment to celestial coordinates that required long-term observational programs spanning multiple generations. Their mathematical frameworks integrated computational concepts that European civilization didn't redevelop until the scientific revolution. The evidence suggested that Sumerian civilization represented technological restoration rather than innovation, systematic implementation of preserved knowledge networks that had been archived through catastrophic transition periods, then restored when environmental conditions stabilized sufficiently to support advanced technological development again. But if advanced human technological capability extended much further into prehistoric periods than official histories acknowledged, then established academic, religious, and political authority structures faced systematic challenges that institutional gatekeepers weren't prepared to address. Professor Grimshaw had learned this lesson through direct professional experience. When her 2018 geological survey results documented systematic preservation evidence at Mesopotamian sites, her research grant funding was quietly terminated. Her university position underwent budget restructuring. Her access to classified excavation data was systematically revoked under security protocol updates. The institutional response followed predictable patterns that Commander Blackwood recognized from 32 years managing sensitive military operations. Information that challenged established authority frameworks underwent systematic suppression, regardless of empirical validity. Evidence that suggested alternative historical timelines received classification review. Researchers who pursued unauthorized analytical approaches found their security clearances quietly downgraded. Dr. Iris Blackwood had watched her colleagues navigate similar institutional pressure. Archaeologists who documented technological capabilities that exceeded official developmental models found their findings reclassified as mythological interpretation. Engineers who analyzed precision specifications in ancient artifacts had their technical reports reassigned to cultural studies departments, where engineering analysis carried no academic authority. The suppression wasn't dramatic or conspiratorial. It was systematic and bureaucratic. Peer review processes that ensured institutional consensus. Academic publication standards that excluded speculative analysis. Research funding priorities that supported conventional theoretical frameworks while defunding alternative approaches. Adrian Cross had experienced this institutional resistance during his collaboration with independent researchers like Graham Hancock and Robert Schoch. Mainstream archaeological conferences systematically excluded presentations that challenged official chronological models. Academic journals rejected papers that suggested advanced prehistoric technological capability, regardless of empirical documentation. University positions became unavailable for scholars who pursued fringe research approaches. Yet the physical evidence continued accumulating. Christopher Dunn's engineering analysis of precision stone-cutting techniques in ancient structures revealed tool marks that required diamond-tipped rotary equipment operating at industrial specifications. Robert Schoch's geological dating of the Sphinx enclosure suggested construction periods thousands of years earlier than conventional archaeological models acknowledged. Randall Carlson's catastrophist research documented global environmental disruption that matched patterns described in ancient flood narratives across multiple civilizations. The institutional gatekeepers responded by systematically marginalizing these researchers as pseudo-scientists, despite their academic credentials and methodological rigor. The strategy was effective because it avoided direct engagement with empirical evidence while protecting established theoretical frameworks from systematic challenge. Dr. Thornfield understood the dynamics from his aerospace industry experience. Military contractors who developed technologies that threatened existing procurement systems found their projects systematically defunded through budget reallocations. Engineers who documented capabilities that exceeded official specifications had their security clearances reviewed under reliability protocols. Technical innovations that challenged institutional interests underwent feasibility assessment procedures that effectively eliminated them from consideration. The Sumerian King List represented exactly the type of evidence that institutional systems were designed to suppress. If the reign lengths documented actual knowledge preservation networks operating across extended timeframes, then human technological capability extended much further into prehistoric periods than academic, religious, and political authority structures could accommodate. Universities built their historical departments around linear developmental models that positioned modern institutions as the pinnacle of human intellectual achievement. Religious organizations based their theological frameworks on creation narratives that required human civilization to begin within specific chronological boundaries. Government agencies managed public education systems that supported existing political and economic structures by maintaining particular historical perspectives. Evidence for advanced prehistoric human capability threatened all these institutional frameworks simultaneously. If technological civilization underwent cyclical development across geological timescales, then current academic, religious, and political institutions represented temporary phases rather than permanent achievements. If advanced knowledge preservation networks had operated successfully across catastrophic transition periods, then institutional authorities couldn't claim exclusive expertise about human potential and historical development. Commander Blackwood's classified operations had documented sufficient evidence to destabilize multiple institutional authority systems. Precision engineering capabilities in prehistoric structures, mathematical sophistication in ancient astronomical calculations, metallurgical techniques that exceeded modern industrial capabilities, hydraulic engineering that required advanced computational modeling, archaeological sites that showed systematic technological preservation across catastrophic transition periods. Yet his reports remained classified not because of national security concerns, but because of institutional stability requirements. Public access to this documentation would undermine established academic authorities, challenge religious chronologies, and destabilize educational systems that supported existing political and economic structures. Dr. Iris Blackwood had begun to understand that the suppression wasn't about preventing public access to historical information. It was about protecting institutional frameworks that required specific historical narratives to maintain their authority. If human technological development followed cyclical rather than linear patterns, then institutions that claimed progressive advancement toward ultimate knowledge became questionable rather than authoritative. The Sumerian King List preserved exactly the type of systematic documentation that institutional preservation networks would need to maintain knowledge continuity across catastrophic transition periods. It encoded critical information about extended operational timeframes, astronomical calculation methods, mathematical frameworks, and administrative protocols in narrative format designed to survive periods when direct technological implementation became temporarily impossible. But accessing this preserved information required analytical approaches that institutional gatekeepers systematically discouraged. Independent research methodologies, interdisciplinary collaboration that bypassed academic departmental boundaries, technical analysis that applied engineering standards to archaeological evidence, theoretical frameworks that considered cyclical rather than linear developmental models. Cross had learned to work outside institutional systems entirely. His analytical software operated on personal computing equipment. His research collaborations occurred through informal networks rather than academic affiliations. His findings were published through independent platforms rather than peer-reviewed journals that required institutional approval. This distributed approach allowed systematic analysis that institutional frameworks couldn't control or suppress, but it also limited the research's influence on official historical narratives that determined educational curricula and public understanding of human development patterns. The implications reached far beyond academic politics. If the Sumerian King List documented actual knowledge preservation networks that had maintained technological capability across 241,200 years, then human civilization represented something fundamentally different from official historical narratives. Not a recent emergence from primitive conditions, but a cyclical process of technological development, catastrophic disruption, systematic preservation, and eventual restoration. Dr. Thornfield's analysis of early Sumerian technological specifications revealed implementation capabilities that challenged conventional understanding of human development patterns. Their irrigation systems demonstrated hydraulic engineering that required computational modeling of regional water flow dynamics across multiple river systems. Their astronomical installations showed precision alignment to celestial coordinates that demanded continuous observational programs spanning multiple generations of coordinated institutional development. Their mathematical frameworks incorporated computational concepts that European civilization didn't redevelop until Galileo, Newton, and Leibniz. Their metallurgical techniques displayed molecular-level control that modern industrial processes still struggle to achieve consistently. Their architectural engineering utilized stress distribution principles that contemporary structural analysis recognizes as optimal, but rarely implements due to computational complexity. Such technological integration couldn't emerge overnight through individual innovation or gradual cultural development. It required systematic institutional knowledge accumulation across extended operational timeframes, exactly what their administrative succession records documented in encoded narrative format. When Adrian Cross applied pattern recognition software to analyze the mathematical relationships embedded in the King List, the results revealed computational sophistication that suggested advanced technological inheritance rather than primitive mythological speculation. The rain progressions followed precise astronomical calculation sequences that required institutional knowledge preservation across multiple precessional cycles. But the most disturbing discovery came when cross-correlated Sumerian technological specifications with similar capabilities documented in other ancient civilizations that Graham Hancock's research had identified as potentially connected to advanced prehistoric knowledge networks. Egyptian pyramid construction displayed precision stone cutting and placement that Christopher Dunn's engineering analysis showed required diamond-tipped rotary tools, industrial lifting equipment, and computational planning systems that exceeded modern construction capabilities. Megalithic installations across Europe and Asia demonstrated astronomical alignment and engineering sophistication that suggested coordinated institutional development rather than independent cultural innovation. The geographical distribution of these capabilities indicated systematic knowledge dissemination rather than coincidental parallel development. Ancient civilizations separated by thousands of miles and supposedly hundreds of years showed identical technological approaches, mathematical systems, astronomical knowledge, and engineering solutions that implied shared institutional inheritance. Professor Grimshaw's geological research had documented similar temporal correlations. Sites across multiple continents showed evidence of systematic technological preservation during the same catastrophic transition period around 12,800 to 11,600 years ago that Randall Carlson's research identified as the Younger Dryas impact event. Advanced installations had been systematically archived beneath precisely controlled sediment deposition at locations spanning Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Americas. The preservation techniques showed identical approaches: careful structural protection, controlled environmental sealing, restoration markers that indicated planned future recovery rather than permanent abandonment. The global coordination implied by these preservation efforts suggested institutional networks that operated across continental scales using communication and transportation capabilities that conventional archaeological models couldn't accommodate. If ancient civilizations possessed technological means to coordinate systematic preservation activities across such geographical distances, then their overall technological capability exceeded official historical estimates by orders of magnitude. Commander Blackwood's classified teams had documented physical evidence that supported this possibility. Ancient transportation infrastructure that showed precision engineering requiring advanced surveying and construction capabilities, communication installations that demonstrated understanding of electromagnetic principles that modern science didn't develop until the 19th century, navigation systems that incorporated astronomical calculation methods requiring institutional knowledge preservation across multiple centuries of continuous observation. His daughter Iris had begun to recognize that the suppression of this evidence wasn't protecting national security. It was protecting institutional authority structures that required specific historical narratives to maintain their credibility. If human technological development followed cyclical rather than linear patterns, then institutions that claimed progressive advancement toward ultimate knowledge became questionable rather than authoritative. The Sumerian administrative records preserved exactly the type of systematic documentation that advanced knowledge preservation networks would need to maintain institutional continuity across catastrophic transition periods. They encoded critical information about extended operational timeframes, astronomical calculation methods, mathematical frameworks, administrative protocols, and technological specifications in narrative formats designed to survive periods when direct implementation became temporarily impossible. Dr. Thornfield understood from his aerospace experience that such preservation systems required extraordinary institutional sophistication. Modern satellite missions used similar approaches, critical technical specifications encoded into multiple storage formats, distributed across separate networks, with restoration procedures that could reconstruct operational capability from archived components even after extended periods of system unavailability. But the Sumerian preservation system operated across geological rather than technological timescales. Their institutional networks had maintained knowledge continuity through environmental catastrophes that eliminated surface evidence of advanced technological capability, preserved critical specifications through millennia of reduced operational capacity, then systematically restored technological implementation when environmental conditions improved sufficiently to support advanced civilization again. The mathematical precision embedded in their administrative succession records suggested computational capabilities that required technological infrastructure far more sophisticated than conventional archaeological models acknowledged. Their astronomical calculations incorporated observational data that demanded institutional coordination across extended time frames that no individual or single-generation organization could accommodate. When cross-analyzed the technological specifications using engineering software designed for complex systems analysis, the results indicated systematic implementation of advanced technological principles rather than primitive approximation or mythological symbolism. Their engineering solutions displayed optimization characteristics that suggested institutional knowledge refinement across multiple development cycles. The evidence suggested that what we call the dawn of civilization was actually a systematic restoration event, advanced technological capabilities being recovered from archived preservation systems rather than invented through gradual cultural development. The Sumerians themselves seemed to understand this distinction. Their creation myths consistently described knowledge as being transferred from divine sources rather than developed through human innovation. In their cosmology, the god Enki maintained the fundamental technological and administrative principles, in the Abzu, an underground archive described as lying beneath the freshwater aquifers. When civilization required restoration, these archived principles were systematically transferred through institutional networks rather than discovered through experimentation. Dr. Iris Blackwood had begun to recognize that this wasn't primitive mythology, but sophisticated archival protocol documentation. Modern data storage systems used identical approaches, critical information preserved in isolated environments, protected from system failures that could eliminate operational capability, with restoration procedures designed to reconstruct technological functionality from preserved specifications. The Sumerian descriptions of knowledge transfer from the Abzu matched the systematic preservation and restoration protocols that her father's classified teams had documented at archaeological sites across Mesopotamia. Advanced installations systematically archived beneath protective sediment layers, with restoration markers indicating planned future recovery when operational conditions improved. Cross's analysis revealed that the astronomical calculations embedded in Sumerian technological documentation required observational programs spanning multiple centuries of continuous institutional coordination. Their Venus cycle calculations tracked the planet's 584-day synodic period across 8-year patterns that required 40 years of systematic observation to verify. Their eclipse prediction tables incorporated Saros cycles that demanded 223 lunar months of coordinated data collection. Such observational precision couldn't be maintained by individual astronomers or single-generation programs. It required institutional knowledge networks capable of preserving observational data across extended timeframes while maintaining computational accuracy that modern GPS satellites use for orbital navigation systems. But the most compelling evidence came from Christopher Dunn's engineering analysis of precision stone-cutting techniques found in Sumerian architectural installations. Tool marks showed rotary cutting patterns that required diamond-tipped equipment operating at industrial RPM specifications. Surface finish quality displayed precision tolerances that modern machining centers struggle to achieve consistently. The technological capability implied by this precision engineering exceeded conventional estimates of ancient manufacturing by orders of magnitude. Industrial-grade cutting tools, precision measurement instruments, quality control systems that maintained consistent specifications across multiple installation sites, coordination protocols that ensured identical technical standards across geographically distributed projects. Dr. Thornfield recognized these characteristics from aerospace manufacturing systems that required institutional knowledge preservation across multi-decade development programs. Advanced technological projects demanded systematic documentation of engineering specifications, quality control procedures, manufacturing techniques, and assembly protocols that could maintain operational capability despite personnel changes and organizational transitions. The Sumerian technological installations displayed identical systematic approaches. Standardized engineering specifications maintained across multiple construction sites. Identical precision tolerances applied to geographically distributed projects. Coordinated quality control that ensured consistent implementation of complex technical requirements. Such systematic technological implementation suggested institutional networks that operated with organizational sophistication that conventional archaeological models couldn't accommodate. If ancient civilizations possessed institutional capabilities for coordinating precision engineering projects across extended geographical and temporal scales, Then their overall technological and administrative development exceeded official historical estimates. Professor Grimshaw's geological research had documented similar systematic coordination in the preservation techniques used at archaeological sites worldwide. The sediment deposition that protected advanced installations during catastrophic transition periods showed identical methodologies across continents. Particle size distribution, chemical composition, environmental sealing techniques all indicated coordinated preservation protocols rather than coincidental burial processes. The global consistency of these preservation approaches implied communication and coordination capabilities that required advanced technological infrastructure. If ancient institutional networks could coordinate systematic preservation activities across continental distances during catastrophic periods, then they possessed transportation, communication, and organizational technologies far more sophisticated than conventional models acknowledged. Commander Blackwood's classified documentation included evidence for such technological capabilities. Ancient transportation infrastructure that showed precision engineering requiring advanced surveying systems. Communication installations that demonstrated understanding of electromagnetic principles. Navigation networks that incorporated astronomical calculation methods requiring institutional knowledge preservation across multiple centuries. His teams had also documented metallurgical evidence that supported advanced technological capability. Alloy compositions that required precise temperature control and molecular-level material science. Manufacturing techniques that displayed industrial-grade quality control. Tool marks that indicated precision machinery operating at specifications that modern equipment struggles to achieve. Yet these discoveries remained classified not because they threatened national security, but because they challenged institutional authority structures that required specific historical narratives to maintain credibility. Academic departments built around linear developmental models, religious organizations with creation chronologies that positioned human civilization within particular temporal boundaries, government educational systems that supported existing political frameworks through controlled historical perspectives. Dr. Iris Blackwood understood that accessing the preserved knowledge documented in the Sumerian King List required analytical approaches that institutional gatekeepers systematically discouraged. Independent research methodologies that bypassed academic departmental controls. Technical analysis that applied engineering standards to archaeological evidence. Theoretical frameworks that considered cyclical rather than linear developmental patterns. The institutional resistance wasn't protecting public welfare. It was protecting authority structures that required particular historical narratives to maintain their influence. If human technological development followed cyclical patterns across geological timescales, then institutions that claimed progressive advancement toward ultimate knowledge became questionable rather than authoritative. Cross had learned to work entirely outside institutional systems to avoid this suppression. His analytical software operated on independent computing networks. His research collaborations occurred through informal channels rather than academic affiliations. His findings were published through distributed platforms rather than journals that required institutional approval. This distributed analytical approach allowed Cross to develop theoretical frameworks that institutional systems couldn't control, but it also meant that his discoveries remained outside official historical narratives that determined educational curricula and public understanding of human development. The knowledge existed, but access to it required individual initiative rather than institutional support. You who have managed long-term corporate projects might recognize the systematic challenges involved in maintaining institutional knowledge across extended operational timeframes, personnel changes, organizational restructuring, technological transitions, all threaten knowledge continuity that requires decades to develop and minutes to lose. The Sumerians were describing similar challenges across geological rather than corporate timescales. Their administrative succession records documented systematic approaches to knowledge preservation that modern institutions could learn from. Extended tenure periods that allowed institutional knowledge accumulation across multiple generations. Systematic documentation protocols that preserved critical information in multiple formats. Restoration procedures that could reconstruct operational capability from archived specifications after extended periods of reduced activity. Dr. Thornfield had encountered similar systematic preservation requirements during classified aerospace projects that required knowledge continuity across multi-decade development cycles. Critical mission specifications encoded into redundant storage systems. Technical documentation distributed across separate institutional networks. Personnel training programs designed to transfer complex knowledge systems across generational transitions. The Sumerian King List might represent the oldest documented example of such systematic knowledge preservation. Institutional specifications encoded in narrative format, designed to maintain critical information about advanced technological capabilities through periods when direct implementation became temporarily impossible due to environmental or social catastrophic disruption. But accessing this preserved information required analytical methods that conventional academic institutions systematically discouraged. The mathematical relationships embedded in the administrative succession records could only be decoded using computational approaches that bypassed traditional archaeological interpretation methods. Cross's pattern recognition analysis had revealed that the rain progressions followed astronomical calculation sequences that required institutional knowledge preservation across multiple precessional cycles. The numbers weren't symbolic or mythological. They were computational specifications for maintaining observational programs that demanded centuries of coordinated institutional development. Professor Grimshaw's geological research supported this interpretation. The systematic preservation evidence she had documented at archaeological sites worldwide indicated coordinated archival activities that required advanced organizational capabilities and sophisticated understanding of environmental transition patterns. Someone had predicted the catastrophic periods and implemented preservation protocols designed to maintain critical knowledge through disruption events. The precision of these preservation activities suggested institutional networks that possessed environmental prediction capabilities far more sophisticated than conventional models acknowledged. If ancient civilizations could accurately predict catastrophic transition periods and implement systematic preservation protocols, then their understanding of environmental cycles, astronomical patterns, and geological processes exceeded official scientific estimates. Commander Blackwood's classified teams had documented physical evidence that supported such advanced environmental prediction capability. Ancient installations positioned to avoid flood zones that wouldn't be inundated for thousands of years after construction. Structural engineering designed to withstand seismic events that required precise understanding of geological stress patterns. Preservation systems calibrated to environmental conditions that demanded sophisticated understanding of long-term climate cycles. Such prediction accuracy required observational programs and computational capabilities that suggested technological infrastructure far more advanced than conventional archaeological models could accommodate. If ancient institutional networks possessed environmental prediction systems that operated across geological timescales, then their overall technological development exceeded current human capabilities in fundamental ways. Dr. Iris Blackwood had begun to understand that her archaeological training had systematically excluded analytical methods that could decode this preserved information. Academic departments maintained Rigid boundaries between archaeological interpretation and technical analysis that prevented interdisciplinary approaches necessary to understand advanced technological evidence. Engineering analysis was relegated to separate departments that didn't study archaeological materials. Astronomical calculations were assigned to academic specializations that didn't consider ancient technological capabilities. Mathematical pattern recognition was restricted to computational fields that didn't engage with historical evidence. The institutional compartmentalization that protected academic authority also prevented systematic analysis that could reveal advanced technological capabilities preserved in archaeological records. Cross's independent research demonstrated that computational analysis could decode sophisticated information encoded in ancient documents, but academic institutions systematically excluded such approaches from official archaeological methodology. The suppression wasn't conspiratorial, it was structural. Academic departments that maintained authority through specialized expertise couldn't accommodate analytical approaches that required interdisciplinary coordination. Institutional systems designed to preserve established knowledge couldn't incorporate discovery methods that challenged fundamental theoretical frameworks. Dr. Thornfield recognized identical dynamics from aerospace industry experience. Military contractors that developed revolutionary technologies found their innovations systematically excluded from procurement processes that required established supplier relationships. Engineering solutions that exceeded official performance specifications underwent feasibility review procedures that effectively eliminated them from consideration. The institutional resistance protected existing authority structures and supplier networks rather than optimizing technological capability. Similarly, academic institutions protected established theoretical frameworks and departmental expertise rather than optimizing analytical capability for understanding advanced technological evidence. But the preserved knowledge remained accessible to analytical approaches that operated outside institutional constraints. Cross's computational analysis, Grimshaw's geological research, Thornfield's engineering expertise, Blackwood's classified documentation all contributed to systematic understanding that conventional academic methods couldn't achieve. The Sumerian King List represented one component of a comprehensive knowledge preservation system that had maintained critical information about advanced technological capabilities across catastrophic transition periods. Decoding this preserved information required analytical coordination that transcended institutional boundaries designed to maintain academic authority rather than optimize discovery capability. When Cross integrated the mathematical specifications embedded in the administrative succession records with Grimshaw's geological evidence for systematic preservation activities, the results revealed institutional networks that had operated with organizational sophistication that exceeded current human capability for coordinating complex technological projects across extended temporal and geographical scales. The implications reached beyond academic curiosity into fundamental questions about human potential and institutional development. If ancient civilizations had achieved technological capabilities that exceeded current human performance in environmental prediction, precision engineering, and organizational coordination, then conventional assumptions about progressive development required systematic reconsideration. Dr. Thornfield's analysis suggested that the technological specifications preserved in Sumerian records represented not primitive approximations, but sophisticated solutions that modern engineering was only beginning to redevelop. Their hydraulic systems incorporated pressure dynamics and flow calculations that required computational modeling capabilities. Their astronomical installations displayed precision alignment that demanded long-term observational programs and mathematical frameworks that European civilization didn't recover until the scientific revolution. Their metallurgical techniques achieved molecular-level control that contemporary industrial processes struggle to implement consistently. Their architectural engineering utilized stress distribution principles that modern structural analysis recognizes as optimal, but rarely applies due to computational complexity. If these technological capabilities represented systematic restoration rather than gradual innovation, then human civilization followed cyclical rather than linear development patterns across geological timescales, advanced technological phases alternating with reduced operational periods, systematic knowledge preservation through catastrophic transitions, institutional restoration when environmental conditions improved sufficiently to support complex organizational networks again. Commander Blackwood's classified documentation suggested that this cyclical pattern continued into modern periods. Advanced technological capabilities that appeared during specific historical phases then systematically declined or disappeared entirely. Knowledge preservation systems that maintained critical information through periods of reduced institutional capability. Restoration protocols that could reconstruct technological functionality from archived specifications. His teams had documented evidence for systematic knowledge preservation activities that operated through historical periods when conventional models suggested technological regression. Advanced engineering capabilities maintained by specialized institutional networks during periods when general technological development declined. Precision manufacturing techniques preserved through organizational systems that operated independently of broader cultural or political developments. Dr. Iris Blackwood understood that her archaeological training had systematically excluded analytical frameworks that could recognize such cyclical development patterns. Academic chronological models required linear progression from primitive to advanced conditions. Educational curricula that positioned current institutions as representing the pinnacle of human intellectual development. But the physical evidence suggested alternative development patterns that conventional institutional frameworks couldn't accommodate. Technological capabilities that appeared fully developed without transitional phases. Advanced knowledge systems that operated during periods when general cultural development remained primitive. Engineering solutions that exceeded contemporary performance despite supposedly limited resources and organizational capabilities. Cross's computational analysis had revealed that the mathematical relationships embedded in ancient technological documentation followed patterns that required institutional knowledge preservation across extended operational timeframes. The astronomical calculations incorporated observational data that demanded continuous institutional coordination across multiple generations. The engineering specifications displayed optimization characteristics that suggested systematic refinement across multiple development cycles. Such institutional sophistication couldn't emerge through gradual cultural evolution or individual innovation. It required systematic knowledge networks that operated with organizational capabilities designed to survive catastrophic transition periods while maintaining technological functionality across geological rather than historical timescales. Professor Grimshaw's geological research had documented physical evidence that supported this interpretation. Systematic preservation activities that occurred during predicted catastrophic periods. Coordinated archival protocols that protected advanced installations across continental geographical scales. Restoration markers that indicated planned future recovery rather than permanent abandonment. The precision and coordination of these preservation activities suggested institutional networks that possessed prediction capabilities, organizational sophistication, and technological resources that exceeded conventional estimates of ancient human development. If such advanced institutional networks had operated successfully across multiple catastrophic transition cycles, then human technological capability represented accumulated knowledge preservation rather than recent innovation. The Sumerian King List documented one component of these knowledge preservation systems: administrative specifications that encoded critical information about extended operational timeframes, astronomical calculation methods, mathematical frameworks, and institutional protocols in narrative formats designed to survive periods when direct technological implementation became temporarily impossible. But accessing this preserved information required analytical approaches that transcended institutional boundaries, designed to protect academic authority rather than optimize discovery capability. Independent research methodologies that bypassed departmental controls. Technical analysis that applied engineering standards to archaeological evidence. Computational pattern recognition that decoded mathematical relationships embedded in ancient documentation. Dr. Thornfield recognized that such analytical coordination required systematic collaboration between specialists who operated outside conventional institutional constraints, engineers who applied technical expertise to archaeological materials, geologists who analyzed systematic preservation evidence across multiple sites, computational analysts who decoded mathematical specifications embedded in ancient records. The knowledge existed, systematically preserved in multiple formats across archaeological sites worldwide, but accessing it required individual initiative and interdisciplinary coordination that institutional systems systematically discouraged. Academic departments that maintained authority through specialized expertise couldn't accommodate analytical approaches that challenged fundamental theoretical frameworks. Yet the preserved knowledge remained relevant to contemporary technological development. Ancient solutions to engineering problems that modern systems struggled to solve efficiently. Environmental prediction capabilities that exceeded current forecasting accuracy. Organizational protocols that maintained institutional knowledge across extended operational timeframes despite personnel transitions and technological changes. Cross understood that the systematic suppression of this knowledge wasn't protecting public welfare. It was protecting institutional authority structures that required specific historical narratives to maintain influence. If human technological development followed cyclical patterns that included advanced capabilities in prehistoric periods, then institutions that claimed progressive advancement toward ultimate knowledge became questionable rather than authoritative. The implications extended beyond academic politics into fundamental questions about human potential, institutional development, and technological capability that current educational and political systems weren't designed to address. The clay tablet sits now in a climate-controlled vault beneath the Pentagon, its wedge-shaped marks still holding the names of those impossible administrators. If you could examine it closely, feeling the roughness of ancient clay beneath your fingertips, you would sense something beyond translation. A vibration from 5,000 years ago that still hums with systematic precision. Dr. Elias Thornfield often reflects on what his aerospace career taught him about long-term projects and institutional memory. Every satellite mission he'd worked on required knowledge preservation systems designed to maintain operational capability across decades when direct human oversight became impractical. The Sumerians had solved identical problems across geological timescales using clay tablets instead of digital storage. Their solution was more robust than ours. While our electronic systems fail after decades, requiring constant maintenance and platform migrations, their clay archives have preserved critical specifications for millennia without any technological infrastructure. They encoded institutional knowledge in storage media that survived electromagnetic interference, climate change, political collapse, and language extinction. Professor Helena Grimshaw continues her geological research despite institutional pressure, documenting systematic preservation evidence at sites across 6 continents. Her findings suggest that the knowledge preservation networks operated on a scale that dwarfs any contemporary international organization. Ancient institutional coordination that spanned continents and survived catastrophic transitions that eliminated modern civilizations entirely. Commander Pike Blackwood retired from military service in 2019, but his classified reports remain archived in government facilities that officially don't exist. His documentation proves that human technological capability extends much further into prehistoric periods than academic, religious, or political institutions can acknowledge without systematic reorganization of their authority structures. His daughter, Dr. Iris Blackwood, now operates as an independent researcher, applying archaeological expertise outside institutional constraints that limited her analytical capability. She understands that accessing preserved ancient knowledge requires approaches that transcend academic boundaries, designed to protect established authority rather than optimize discovery. Adrian Cross has developed computational analysis software that can decode mathematical relationships embedded in ancient documentation from multiple civilizations. His pattern recognition programs have revealed systematic knowledge preservation activities that operated across geological timescales using encoding methods that required institutional sophistication exceeding current human organizational capability. Together, they represent something that institutional gatekeepers fear: systematic analytical coordination that operates outside official control mechanisms. Independent specialists applying technical expertise to archaeological evidence without requiring academic approval or government authorization. Interdisciplinary collaboration that can access preserved knowledge despite institutional resistance. Their discoveries demonstrate that the Sumerian King List preserves actual specifications for institutional networks that maintained technological capability across 200 years of cyclical development. Not mythology, but systematic documentation encoded in narrative format for preservation through catastrophic transition periods. The implications reach far beyond historical curiosity. If human technological development follows cyclical patterns across geological timescales, then current institutional authorities represent temporary phases rather than permanent achievements. Advanced capabilities that appear suddenly operate successfully across extended periods, then undergo systematic preservation during predicted catastrophic transitions. You, who have navigated corporate restructuring, technological obsolescence, and institutional change, might recognize the systematic patterns they documented. Every organization faces the challenge of preserving critical knowledge through transitional periods that threaten operational continuity. The Sumerians solved this problem using systematic preservation methods that maintained technological capability across environmental catastrophes that eliminated surface evidence entirely. Their administrative succession records document institutional approaches that modern organizations could apply to maintain knowledge continuity through political, economic, or technological disruptions that threaten operational capability. Extended leadership tenure that allows institutional knowledge accumulation across generational transitions. Systematic documentation protocols that preserve critical information in multiple formats. Restoration procedures that can reconstruct operational capability from archived specifications. The 200 years they documented weren't individual lifespans. They were institutional development timescales that allowed technological capability to accumulate across astronomical cycles that required continuous observation spanning multiple centuries. Their mathematical precision suggests computational capabilities that modern engineering is only beginning to redevelop. But perhaps the most profound discovery is that this preserved knowledge remains accessible to analytical approaches that operate outside institutional constraints, designed to protect authority rather than optimize capability. The clay tablets continue their storage function, maintaining systematic specifications that could inform contemporary technological development if accessed through appropriate analytical methods. The flood they described wasn't just environmental catastrophe, it was systematic transition between technological development phases. When their administrative records stated that leadership was taken to archive, they were documenting controlled preservation of advanced capabilities during predicted disruption periods. When they recorded that leadership was restored from archive, they were describing systematic recovery of preserved knowledge networks. Dr. Thornfield understands that every technological civilization faces similar transition challenges. Knowledge preservation through periods that threaten institutional continuity. Systematic restoration of archived capabilities when operational conditions improve. Organizational protocols that can maintain technological functionality across disruption events that eliminate surface infrastructure. The Sumerians achieved this preservation across geological timescales using methods that remain relevant to contemporary institutional challenges. Their systematic approaches to knowledge archival, institutional coordination, and technological restoration represent solutions that modern organizations require for maintaining operational capability through transitional periods that threaten established systems. Clay preserves what electronic systems cannot. Systematic thinking transcends technological platforms, and perhaps that recognition is the first step toward understanding what they preserved. Institutional wisdom that remains as relevant now as it was 200 years ago, waiting for analytical approaches sophisticated enough to access what they systematically maintained through the longest institutional transition in documented human history. The echo of their achievement still resonates through the computational specifications they encoded in permanent storage, reminding us that systematic knowledge preservation represents humanity's most profound technological capability.